The year was 2347, and humanity had finally made it to the stars. But it was not the glorious moment they had dreamed about for centuries. Instead of being welcomed as equals, humans found themselves at the bottom of the galactic food chain. Treated like children who had stumbled into a room full of adults, Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human vessel. Starward Hope. His hands clasped behind his back as he watched the holographic display in front of him. The Galactic Confederation Council was holding another meeting, and as usual, humanity was the subject of their jokes. The Valorians were speaking now. They were tall, beautiful creatures with skin that looked like living crystal. Their bodies shimmered in shades of blue and purple, and they moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy in comparison. High Counselor Zethrin, the leader of their species, was addressing the council about humanity's latest request for membership. "The humans wish to join our council as voting members," Zethrin said, his voice carrying the tone of someone discussing a particularly amusing joke. "They believe their 50 years of space travel qualifies them to sit among species that have mastered the cosmos for millennia." Laughter rippled through the council chamber. The Krithax, massive insectoid beings with hard shells and clicking mandibles, made sounds that passed for amusement among their kind. The Mindari, pale floating creatures who communicated through telepathy, remained silent, but their disdain was clear to anyone who could sense their thoughts. Jake felt his jaw tighten as he watched. Beside him, Lieutenant Megan Price was reading the official response to their petition on her screen. Her face showed no emotion, but Jake had served with her long enough to recognize the anger in her eyes. "Denied again," she said quietly. "No seat on the council. No voting rights. No access to the knowledge archives. They say we need to prove ourselves worthy first. And how exactly are we supposed to do that?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. There was no answer. The Confederation had no intention of ever accepting humanity as equals. They were useful as laborers, as entertainers, as curiosities to be studied and mocked. But equals? Never. The truth was that the Confederation feared what humans might become if given the chance. So they kept them small. They shared just enough technology to keep humans dependent, but never enough to let them become a threat. It was a careful balance, and it had worked for 50 years. Jake remembered the first contact. Back when he was just a young officer fresh out of the academy, the whole world had celebrated when the Valorian ship appeared in Earth's orbit. People had danced in the streets, crying tears of joy at the knowledge that humanity was not alone in the universe. That joy had faded quickly. The Valorians had looked at human technology the way an adult might look at a child's toy. Their faster-than-light drive, which humans had spent decades developing, was dismissed as primitive. Their weapons were laughed at. Their art was called simplistic. Their music was described as noise, and the worst part was that the Valorians were right. Compared to the Confederation, humanity was primitive. Their ships were slower, their weapons weaker, their understanding of the universe smaller. They were infants stumbling into a world of giants. But infants grow up, and humanity had been growing in ways the Confederation never suspected. Jake's personal communicator buzzed. He glanced at it and saw an encrypted message from Dr. Lisa Brennan, the lead scientist at Project Prometheus. The message contained only 3 words: "It's finally ready." He felt his heart skip a beat. For 30 years, humanity's greatest minds had been working in secret, hidden away in laboratories beneath the ice of Europa and in stations orbiting distant moons. The Confederation thought humans were wasting their time with useless experiments. They never bothered to look closer. That was their mistake. Jake excused himself from the bridge and made his way to his private quarters. Once inside, he activated the secure communication system and connected to the hidden network that linked humanity's secret projects. Dr. Brennan's face appeared on the screen. She was a woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She had dedicated her entire life to this moment, sacrificing everything personal for the dream of seeing humanity take its rightful place among the stars. "Tell me," Jake said simply. Lisa smiled. And in that smile, Jake saw decades of frustration, of anger, of determination finally paying off? The zero-point energy extractor is fully operational. We've run every test we can think of, and it works exactly as we predicted. Better, actually. Jake leaned forward. You're certain? Commander, this device draws power directly from the quantum vacuum itself. It provides virtually unlimited energy from the fabric of space. The Valorians still use antimatter reactors. The Krithaks harvest energy from stars. But this? This is something no species in the known galaxy has ever achieved. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. Unlimited energy meant unlimited possibilities. It meant ships that could travel faster than anything the Confederation possessed. It meant weapons that could not be stopped by conventional shields. It meant independence. What about the fleet? He asked. Lisa's smile widened. Admiral Pete Collins reports that all 47 vessels are ready. The new ships are unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. Stealth systems that make them invisible to any known sensor. Drive systems that can cross the galaxy in days instead of weeks. Weapons that use directed quantum fields. Jake sat back in his chair, his mind racing. For 50 years, humanity had played the fool. They had smiled and nodded when the aliens mocked them. They had accepted every insult, every closed door, every humiliation. And all the while, they had been building something magnificent in the shadows. When do we move? He asked. That's your decision, Commander. The scientists have done their part. Now, it's up to the military and the diplomats to decide how we use what we've created. Jake thought about all the humans who had suffered under Confederation rule. The workers forced into menial labor on alien worlds. The artists whose work was dismissed as worthless. The dreamers who were told they would never amount to anything. All of them had been waiting for this moment, even if they didn't know it. Set up a meeting with Admiral Collins and the rest of the leadership, he said finally. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity can really do. Lisa nodded, her eyes bright with anticipation. I've been waiting 30 years to hear those words. As the communication ended, Jake turned to look out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Confederation was continuing its business as usual. Confident in its superiority, certain that nothing could ever challenge its power, they had no idea what was coming. The laughingstock, the galaxy, was about to become something else entirely. And when the revolution began, the universe would never be the same again. Deep beneath the frozen surface of Europa, in a laboratory that officially did not exist, Dr. Lisa Brennan stood before the greatest achievement in human history. The zero-point energy extractor hummed with power, its soft blue glow filling the chamber with light that seemed almost alive. Around her stood a team of scientists who had given everything for this moment. Some had not seen their families in years. Others had abandoned promising careers at prestigious institutions to work in secret on a project that most of the galaxy would have called impossible. They had sacrificed their lives for a dream. And now that dream was real. Dr. Kevin Shaw checked the readings on his console for the 100th time, his hands trembling slightly. He was a young man, barely 30, but he had been working on this project since he was fresh out of university. His entire adult life had led to this moment. Energy output is holding steady at 400% above our initial projections, he reported, his voice cracking with emotion. The quantum vacuum is providing more power than we ever imagined possible. This shouldn't work according to everything we thought we knew about physics. Lisa placed a hand on his shoulder. The universe has more secrets than we ever imagined. Kevin, we just learned how to ask the right questions. She thought back to the early days of the project. When she had first proposed the idea to humanity's secret council of scientists, most had laughed at her. The concept of drawing energy from empty space seemed like fantasy, like something from a bad science fiction story. But Lisa had seen something in the equations that others had missed. A pattern. A possibility it had taken 10 years just to prove the theory was sound. Another 10 to build the first prototype. And 10 more to make it work reliably. 30 years of her life spent in cold laboratories and cramped research stations. All leading to this, the Confederation had no idea any of this was happening. They thought humans were wasting their time with primitive experiments, trying and failing to catch up to technology that other species had mastered long ago. The arrogance of the aliens had been humanity's greatest advantage. They never thought to look closely at what the humans were really doing, on the other side of the solar system. Admiral Pete Collins stood on the observation deck of Horizon Base, a massive station hidden in the shadow of Neptune. Below him, arranged in perfect rows, sat the ships that would change the course of galactic history. They were beautiful, these vessels, sleek and deadly, with lines that suggested both speed and power. They looked nothing like the clunky, primitive ships that humanity showed to the rest of the galaxy. These were predators, built from technologies that the Confederation had never even imagined. Admiral Collins was an old man now, his hair white and his face lined with age. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war he hoped would never come. But he had also learned that peace was only possible when you were strong enough to defend it. "Status report," he said to the officer beside him, Captain Amy Rhodes. A woman with sharp features and even sharper instincts consulted her tablet. "All 47 vessels are fully operational, Admiral. Crews are trained and ready. The new stealth systems have been tested against every sensor technology we know of. We're invisible. And the weapons. The quantum field generators exceed all expectations. In simulations, they cut through Valorian shields like they weren't even there. The Krithox battle armor, which is supposed to be impenetrable, lasted approximately 3 seconds against a direct hit." Collins nodded slowly. He took no pleasure in weapons of war, but he understood their necessity. The Confederation would never accept humanity as equals through diplomacy alone. They needed to be shown that humans could no longer be pushed around. A holographic communication request appeared in front of him. He accepted it, and the image of Commander Jake Morrison flickered to life. Admiral Jake said with a respectful nod, "Dr. Brennan has confirmed that the energy extractor is fully operational. The science division says, we're ready." "No. I've been in contact with her team." Collins turned to look out at the fleet one more time. 47 ships. That's what we have to challenge an empire that spans 1,000 worlds. "It's not about numbers, sir. It's about what those ships can do." Collins smiled slightly. "You sound like Dr. Brennan. She's been right about everything else." That was true. Lisa Brennan had predicted every step of this journey with remarkable accuracy. She had known which technologies would work and which would fail. She had known how long each phase would take. And she had known with absolute certainty that humanity would succeed. Collins turned back to face Jake's hologram. "What's our plan? We reveal ourselves. Not through war, but through demonstration. We show the galaxy what we've achieved and invite them to reconsider their relationship with humanity. And if they respond with force..." Jake's expression hardened. "Then we show them what else we can do." "But I don't think it will come to that, Admiral. The Confederation is built on the assumption that they are the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. When that assumption is proven wrong, their entire power structure will be called into question." Collins considered this. It was a gamble, showing their hand without immediately pressing their advantage. But it was also the right thing to do. Humanity had suffered under the Confederation's arrogance, but that didn't mean they had to become conquerors themselves. "Very well," he said finally. "Prepare the fleet for departure. We move in 48 hours. After the communication ended, Collins remained on the observation deck, alone with his thoughts. He remembered a conversation he had with his grandfather decades ago. When he was just a boy dreaming of the stars, his grandfather had been part of the generation that first made contact with the aliens. He had watched the initial excitement turn to disappointment, then to humiliation. He had seen humanity reduced to servants and jokes in a galaxy that should have welcomed them. "They'll underestimate us," his grandfather had said. "They always do. But that's their weakness, not ours. Because while they're busy laughing, we'll be working. And one day, we'll show them what humans can really do." It had taken 3 generations. But that day had finally arrived, in laboratories and shipyards across human space. Thousands of people who had dedicated their lives to this moment prepared for what came next. Scientists ran final checks on equipment. Engineers made last-minute adjustments to ship systems. Soldiers trained for battles they hoped would never happen. They were all part of the silent revolution, a movement that had grown in the shadows while the galaxy looked the other way. They had been patient. They had been careful. And now they were ready. Dr. Lisa Brennan sent one final message to all the hidden facilities before the operation began. It was short, but it carried the weight of everything they had sacrificed and everything they hoped to achieve. 30 years ago, we made a promise to ourselves and to every human who would come after us. We promised that one day we would be more than the galaxy's joke. That day is here. Make it count. The silent revolution was about to become very loud indeed. The Valorian trade convoy was traveling through what they considered safe space. Far from any threat or danger, there were 12 ships in the convoy, each one carrying valuable cargo from one end of Confederation territory to the other. The crews were relaxed, going about their duties with the casual confidence of beings who had never known true challenge. Commander Velthan stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, reviewing shipping manifests and thinking about the celebration that awaited him at the end of this journey. His daughter was getting married, and he had been looking forward to the event for months. Nothing could spoil his good mood. Then his sensor officer made a sound that Velthan had never heard before, a sharp intake of breath that spoke of pure shock. "Commander, there's a ship directly ahead of us." Velthan looked up from his work. "What kind of ship?" "Confederation. Independent trader?" "I don't know, Commander. It's not in any registry, and I have no idea where it came from." One moment the space ahead was empty. The next moment, it was there. Velthan felt a cold sensation spread through his crystalline body. Ships did not simply appear out of nowhere. That was impossible. Even the most advanced stealth technology in the Confederation required some detectable signature. But his sensors showed nothing until the ship had chosen to reveal itself. He looked at the main view screen and felt his color shift to pale blue, the Valorian equivalent of fear. The ship in front of them was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was sleek and dark, with smooth lines that suggested both beauty and danger. There were no visible weapons ports, no engine exhaust, nothing that matched any design philosophy he was familiar with. And painted on its hull, unmistakable and impossible, was the flag of Earth. "Human vessel," Velthan said into the communication channel, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Identify yourself and explain how you approached without detection. Human ships do not possess stealth capability." There was a moment of silence. Then a woman's face appeared on the view screen. She was human, with short brown hair and cold eyes that showed no warmth or fear. She wore a uniform that Velthan did not recognize, sleek and professional, nothing like the crude clothing humans usually wore. "I am Captain Amy Rhodes of the Human Coalition vessel Defiant," she said. "Your ships possess many capabilities you are not aware of, Commander. We are here to deliver a message. You have no authority to stop a Confederation convoy. We're not stopping you. We're not making demands. We're simply making introductions." Captain Rhodes nodded to someone off-screen. "Send the data packet." What happened next would be talked about for centuries. Across the entire galaxy, on every Confederation world, in every station and ship and outpost, the same transmission arrived at exactly the same moment. It contained technical specifications for the zero-point energy extractor, complete with mathematical proofs and experimental data. It contained images of the human fleet, ships whose capabilities were detailed with cold precision. And it contained a simple message. Humanity is no longer asking for acceptance. We are announcing our presence. On the Confederation Council homeworld, High Counselor Zethrin watched the data scroll across his display, his crystalline form flickering through colors of distress and disbelief. Around him, the other council members were reacting with similar shock. Some were shouting. Others sat in stunned silence. "This cannot be accurate," Zethrin said to his aide, a young Valorian who looked like he might shatter from stress. "Run the analysis again. There must be an error." "We have run it 17 times, High Counselor. The mathematics are sound. The physics are revolutionary. The humans have achieved what we believed to be impossible." The Krithak's ambassador's mandibles clicked in agitation, creating a sound like breaking glass. They were supposed to be primitive, simple, manageable. We gave them scraps of technology to keep them dependent. How did they accomplish this under our observation? Before anyone could answer, a new hologram flickered to life in the center of the council chamber. It was a human male, tall and confident, wearing the same unfamiliar uniform as the captain who had stopped the convoy. His face showed no fear, no uncertainty, only a calm determination that made Zethrin deeply uncomfortable. Because you were not observing, the human said, you were dismissing. There's a significant difference. Zethrin rose from his seat, his form turning a deep crimson that indicated fury. You have no right to address this council. This transmission is unauthorized. Our security systems should have prevented this intrusion. Your security systems were designed to stop technology you understood. We are using technology you don't. The human paused. To let that sink in, my name is Commander Jake Morrison, and I am here to inform the Confederation that the rules of the galaxy have changed. Is this a declaration of war? No, High Counselor. This is an announcement. For 50 years, humanity asked to join the Confederation as equals. You refused. We asked for access to your knowledge archives. You refused. We asked for basic respect, and you laughed in our faces. Jake's voice hardened, so we stopped asking. We stopped begging for scraps from your table. We built our own. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding action, demanding explanations, demanding that someone do something. But Jake's hologram remained calm, waiting for the noise to subside. Any species that wishes to join us is welcome, he continued, when there was enough quiet to be heard. We are not conquerors. We are not trying to destroy the Confederation, but we will no longer be treated as inferiors. Any species that wishes to stand with humanity as equals will find us generous partners. Any species that wishes to oppose us should consider very carefully what you have just witnessed. Zethrin's color shifted through several shades before settling on a reluctant gray. What exactly do you want from us? Recognition, respect, the same things we have been asking for since first contact. The only difference now is that you no longer have the option of saying no. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in shocked silence. For a long moment, no one moved or spoke. Then slowly, the representatives began to look at each other with new eyes. The balance of power they had taken for granted for millennia had just shifted beneath their feet. In the hours and days that followed, the reaction across the galaxy was immediate and varied. Some species began reaching out to humanity through back channels, eager to establish relationships with what was clearly a rising power. The Talvani, who had been treated as servants by the Confederation for their entire history, sent messages of support and requests for alliance. Other species called for military action. The Valorians, their pride wounded, demanded that the Council authorize a fleet to put the humans in their place before they became a true threat. But their calls for war found less support than they expected. Too many species had seen the data packet. Too many understood what it meant, deep in the archives of the Mindari Collective. The telepathic elders exchanged thoughts that younger races could not perceive. They had sensed something in humanity long ago, a fire and determination that set them apart. They had dismissed it, just like everyone else. Now they understood their mistake. What do we do? Asked one of the younger elders. The eldest, a being who had lived for thousands of years and seen empires rise and fall, gave a response that rippled through their shared consciousness like a stone dropped in still water. We wait, we watch, and we hope that when humanity finishes reshaping the galaxy, there is still a place in it for the rest of us. The galaxy had mocked humanity for 50 years. Now, finally, they were paying attention. 3 months had passed. Since humanity revealed itself to the galaxy and everything had changed, the stable order that the Confederation had maintained for thousands of years was crumbling. Not through war or violence, but through something far more powerful: choice. Species that had been loyal members of the Confederation for centuries were now questioning their allegiance. The Telvanni, who had served as laborers and servants since their first contact with the Valorians, had formally requested to join the human coalition. The crystalline beings of the Mirith system, long ignored by the Council, had followed suit. Every day brought new requests, new alliances, new fractures in the old order. Dr. Lisa Brennan now served as humanity's chief ambassador to the growing coalition. Her laboratory coat had been replaced by diplomatic attire, but her eyes still held the same sharp intelligence that had driven her scientific work. She worked from an office aboard Unity Station, a massive structure that humanity had constructed in record time using their new energy technology. "The Talvani delegation is concerned," she explained to Commander Morrison during their morning briefing. The holographic display between them showed a map of coalition space, which had grown significantly since their first announcement. "They've spent their entire history being used by others. They need assurance that we won't become what the Confederation was." Jake nodded, understanding the weight of her words. It would be easy, dangerously easy, to simply replace one empire with another. The technologies that humanity had developed gave them power that no single species had ever possessed. And the temptation to use that power for domination rather than cooperation was real. "Make sure they understand our position," he said. "Every species in this coalition has an equal voice. One vote per species, regardless of population or technological level. No special privileges for humanity." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Some of our own people are questioning that approach. They say we should lead, not just participate. Those people are wrong. Confederation failed because it believed that power made you superior. We succeed by proving that power comes with responsibility, not privilege." On the border of what had been Confederation space, Admiral Pete Collins commanded the human fleet from his flagship Endeavour. What had started as 47 ships had grown to 93, each one crewed by volunteers who believed in what they were fighting for. Not conquest, not revenge. Just the simple right to exist as equals. Captain Amy Rhodes served as his second in command now, her quick thinking during the convoy encounter having earned her a promotion. She stood beside him on the bridge, studying the tactical display that showed the positions of ships across a vast stretch of space. "The Valorians have assembled their battle fleet at the Nexus Point," she reported. 47 heavy warships, their most powerful vessels. They're calling it a defensive formation. Collins studied the display without expression. "What does intelligence say? They're testing us?" The Council is divided on how to respond to humanity's rise. The Valorians want a military solution, but they need proof that they can actually win. They're hoping we'll make a mistake. Give them an excuse to attack with full force. Collins understood the game being played. The Valorians were proud, perhaps the proudest species in the Confederation. They had been at the top of the galactic hierarchy for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to be challenged. Humanity's sudden emergence as a rival power was an insult they could not tolerate. But pride made people stupid, made them overconfident, and made them underestimate their opponents. "Signal the fleet," Collins ordered. "All ships move to intercept position. Maintain formation. Weapons offline, but ready. We do not fire first under any circumstances." The human fleet moved through space with a grace that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Their ships left no exhaust trails, made no detectable. Noise appeared as nothing more than shadows against the stars until they chose to be seen. They took up position facing the Valorian fleet, close enough to communicate, far enough to maneuver. For 3 days, the two fleets faced each other across an invisible line in space. Neither side moved. Neither side spoke. Tension was suffocating. Felt not just by the crews of the ships, but by every being in the galaxy who was watching the confrontation unfold. On the second day, Jake Morrison arrived aboard the Endeavour, having traveled from Unity Station to be present for whatever came next. He found Admiral Collins on the observation deck, staring out at the Valorian ships with an expression of patient determination. "Any movement?" Jake asked. "None. They're waiting for us to make a mistake, and if we don't?" Collins allowed himself a small smile. "Then they have to decide whether their pride is worth dying for. I'm betting it isn't." It was High Counselor Zethrin who finally broke the silence. His transmission reached the Endeavour on the 4th day. his crystalline form displaying the muted colors of someone who had been forced to accept an unpleasant reality. Admiral Collins. I am authorized by the Confederation Council to discuss terms. Collins leaned back in his command chair, keeping his expression neutral. There are no terms to discuss, High Counselor. We are not at war. You have destabilized our alliance. You have stolen member species from our Confederation. You've undermined an order that has maintained galactic peace for 3,000 years. Your order maintained peace through inequality, through exploitation, through treating younger species as servants rather than partners. We haven't destabilized anything, so we've simply offered an alternative. Zethron's colors shifted through, several shades, revealing the inner turmoil he was trying to hide. What do you want from us? Recognition. The Confederation acknowledges the human coalition as a sovereign power with equal standing. No sanctions, no blockades, no military action. In return, we guarantee the same. And if we refuse, Collins gestured, and the tactical display behind him shifted to show not just the 93 ships of his current fleet, but projections of what humanity's shipyards would produce in the coming months and years. The numbers were staggering, far beyond anything the Confederation could hope to match. Then you will have chosen a war you cannot win, Collins said, his voice calm but firm. Not because we are stronger, though we are. Not because we want to destroy you, because we don't. But because we are willing to sacrifice more than you can imagine. Humanity did not climb up from dust and darkness to be crushed by ancient powers too proud to change. We will spend every resource, risk every life, and burn every bridge before we go back to being your inferiors. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of history. I will present your terms to the Council, Zethron finally said. But I make no promises. I ask for none. Only results. As the communication ended, and Collins turned to find Jake watching him with something like admiration. That was quite a speech, Admiral. Collins shook his head. It wasn't a speech. It was the truth. Every word of it. He looked out at the stars, at the Valorian ships still holding their position. Our ancestors looked up at these same stars and dreamed of the day we would join the galactic community. They imagined being welcomed as friends. Instead, we found arrogance and contempt. And now we write our own story. Whatever happens next, humanity will never go back to being what we were. We've proven that we deserve to be here. The rest of the galaxy will just have to learn to live with that. 3 weeks later, the Valorian fleet withdrew from the Nexus Point without firing a shot. The Council had accepted humanity's terms. The revolution had succeeded without a single battle being fought. But everyone knew that this was only the beginning. The hard work of building a new galactic order was just starting. 1 year had passed since humanity revealed its true capabilities to the galaxy. The universe would never be the same again. The Treaty of Unity was being signed in orbit above Earth, witnessed by representatives of 43 species and broadcast to every inhabited world across known space. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, watching the gathered delegations below through a transparent floor that offered a stunning view of the Grand Hall. The sight still amazed him, even after all these months of work to make it possible. Valorians and humans stood together in small groups, their earlier hostility giving way to cautious cooperation. High Counselor Zethron himself was engaged in conversation with Dr. Lisa Brennan, his crystalline form displaying warm amber tones that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The Krathox delegates, massive and intimidating, were examining human technology with something approaching genuine respect rather than dismissal. Even the Mindari had sent observers, their pale floating forms drifting through the crowd like ghosts made of light. Their telepathic whispers carried what some interpreted as approval, though with the Mindari, it was always difficult to be certain of anything. Lisa made her way up to the observation deck, joining Jake at the viewport. She looked tired but satisfied, the kind of exhaustion that came from meaningful work rather than pointless effort. Hard to believe it's only been a year, she said quietly. Hard to believe it took 50 years before that, Jake replied. All that time, playing the fool, accepting their contempt. Sometimes I wonder if there was another way. Lisa shook her head. There wasn't. The Confederation would never have accepted us as equals through persuasion alone. They needed proof. They needed to see that we could match them, that we could surpass them. Words wouldn't have been enough. She was right, of course. She usually was. The arrogance of the ancient species had been so deeply rooted that nothing short of a complete demonstration of capability would have changed their minds. Humanity had to become powerful before they could demand respect, but power without wisdom was just another form of tyranny. That was why the coalition they had built mattered so much. The Talvani ambassador stopped me on my way here, Lisa continued. She wanted to thank us personally. Her species has served as laborers for the Confederation for 600 years. 600 years of being told they were lesser, that their only value was in their ability to work. And now they have a seat at the table equal to everyone else. Jake thought about that. 600 years. Generations of Talvani had lived and died believing that their place in the universe was to serve others. Now their children would grow up knowing that they mattered, that their voices counted, that their dreams were valid. That was worth everything they had sacrificed. Below, Admiral Pete Collins was shaking hands with Zethrin, the two former adversaries finding common ground in their shared exhaustion with conflict. Collins had aged visibly over the past year, the stress of command taking its toll on his body. But his eyes were bright, alive with the knowledge that he had helped create something lasting. The revolution isn't over, Lisa said, as if reading Jake's thoughts. This is just the beginning. We've changed the balance of power, but we haven't changed attitudes. There are species out there that still see us as upstarts, that are waiting for any sign of weakness. I know. And there are humans who want us to do exactly what the Confederation did. To use our power to dominate rather than cooperate. To become the new masters of the galaxy. I know that too. Jake turned to face her directly. That's why what we do next matters so much. We have to prove that there's another way. That power doesn't have to corrupt. That strength can be used for building instead of destroying. Lisa smiled, the expression softening her usually intense features. That sounds like something a diplomat would say. I've been spending too much time with you. They shared a moment of quiet laughter, a brief relief from the weight of everything they carried. Then Lisa's expression grew serious again. What's next for you? She asked. Someone has to stay here and make sure this new order actually works. Coalition building isn't as exciting as scientific breakthroughs, but it needs to be done. He paused, looking out at the stars beyond the station. What about you? The Science Division wants to explore the Outer Rim. There are regions of space that even the Confederation never mapped. New resources, possibly new species. It could take decades. Sounds like exactly what you'd enjoy. It does. But I'll miss this. She gestured at the gathering below. Seeing what we built actually working. Watching species that used to hate each other, learning to cooperate. We'll keep building while you're gone, and when you come back, there will be even more to see. A chime sounded through the station, signaling that the treaty signing was about to begin. Representatives took their places around the central table, humans sitting alongside aliens who had once dismissed them as primitive curiosities. The document before them contained more than just words on a page. It contained the hopes of billions of beings across the galaxy who had dared to dream of a better future. Hi, Counselor Zethrin was the first to sign, his crystalline hand leaving a mark that shimmered with inner light. Admiral Collins signed for humanity, his signature strong and steady despite his age. One by one, the representatives of the other coalition species added their marks. Each signature a promise and a commitment. When it was finished, there was a moment of silence throughout the station. Then applause broke out, spreading from the grand hall up through every level and corridor. Beings of dozens of different species celebrated together, their differences forgotten in the joy of what they had accomplished. Jake watched from above, feeling something he had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Not the desperate hope of the oppressed. Clinging to dreams they feared would never come true, but the confident hope of those who had proven that change was possible. The galaxy had mocked humanity. It had dismissed them, belittled them, and tried to keep them in their place. And humanity had responded not with anger or vengeance, but with innovation, determination, and an outstretched hand. They had proven that the underdog could rise. That mockery meant nothing against the power of those who refused to give up. That every species, no matter how young or old, deserved the chance to reach for the stars. The revolution had begun not with weapons or war, but with proof. Proof that a little planet orbiting an unremarkable star had produced a species capable of wonders. Proof that the laughingstock of the galaxy could become its conscience. Proof that there was another way. As the celebration continued below, and the stars shone bright through the viewport, Jake allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. They had done it. Not just for humanity, but for every species that had ever been told they were not enough. The work was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, setbacks and struggles and moments of doubt. But for now, in this moment, the universe felt full of possibility. Dr. Lisa Brennan joined him at the viewport one last time before heading to prepare for her expedition. "We actually did it," she said softly. "We did. Think anyone will believe it when they read about it in the history books?" Jake smiled, looking out at the gathered species, at the stars beyond, at the future that stretched before them like an endless ocean of light. "They'll believe it because we'll make sure it keeps being true. Every generation, every day. We'll keep proving that what we built here matters," Lisa nodded. And together, they watched as the dawn of a new era spread across the galaxy, carried not by force of arms but by the simple, powerful truth that every being deserved the chance to shine. The revolution had succeeded. But more importantly, the future had begun.